Hey, welcome back to the Scope Creepers podcast. My name is Aramis. I hope you're having a lovely day. It is currently negative 20 degrees here in Minnesota, and it is freaking cold out there. So I hope if it's cold where you are, you've got yourself a nice cozy blanket, maybe a nice warm cup of coffee or tea, and you're going to sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation today with my guest, Stefan Hubbard. Hubbard? That's the first time I've said his name out loud, so I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but... Steven works for, partners with GameDev.tv. I'm butchering this intro, and I'm so sorry. I'm still drinking my coffee for the day. He is partnered with GameDev.tv to be their product owner, and they want me to let you know this isn't sponsored, but I think it would be a great asset for you to go and check out some of their new free courses that they just released, and he even teaches their Unity course here. So they have all the way from Unreal and Unity and Blender and this Magic 3D voxel thing, which I think looks actually kind of cool. Maybe I'll check that one out because I have very limited experience with 3D stuff. But Steven is also a professional poker player, having like full time, like most of his income is coming from poker, which is super cool and interesting. And we talk about that because I've recently read a book by Nate Silver called, I'm looking over at my bookshelf, called On the Edge. And Nate Silver is a longtime poker player himself. He also ran the 538 news site for a while that no longer exists and currently runs the Silver Bulletin. But Nate talks a lot about the expected value of things and how people generally don't take enough risks and don't think about the upsides. And sometimes these upsides can be really, really big. It is something that fundamentally changed how I approach business, how I approach thinking, and has helped me and Thornady, or at least me, be open to the idea of thinking about the expected value of my time investment into game development. So whether that's I'm spending 10 hours working on this system, what's the return on investment of that? What's the risk of that? Is this something that's actually going to be valuable? And this is something you can think about a little bit more from the vein of making bets or stock marketing investments or things that have like a little bit clearer upside or downside, but with so much variance in life in general. I think thinking about trying to find things that have clear, upside to them, as opposed to like taking a gamble that's like, oh, it's a 10% chance it works, and if it works, it has a very small reward, versus trying to find a 10% chance that it works and that reward is really high. So we talk a lot about that during the podcast today, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that to give you an idea that expected value, it's something that's going to be coming up a bunch. If you want to pause the podcast here, go watch a quick YouTube video about expected value and those different things so you can have a little bit more context to this conversation. I think that could help you enjoy this conversation even further. That's it. Oh, he also makes games and stuff. I didn't mention that as much as I should have in the front of this, but a professional poker player, a game developer, and then the conversation becomes a union of all these things, and I really enjoyed the conversation. And let's get into it.
I've basically made it a goal for 2026 to be a little bit more unapologetically myself. And in the past, I've sort of beat around the bush and not really wanted to mix my two lives.
Yeah.
But this, if anything, is kind of like my first opportunity that I'm going to use to just talk about what I want to talk about. Like, I've tried to, in the past, not mix those two lives because game dev is a big part of my life and poker is a big part of my life. And I'm like, let's just kind of keep those things separate for reasons.
Yeah.
I'm more than excited to talk about those types of things, and we can go into it as much detail as we want to go down.
Yeah. Well, if you're ready,
there's a lot of parallels that I'm super excited to talk about in between game dev and poker, and I feel like this is actually the first opportunity that I've had to really talk about that with someone that maybe like loosely gets it. So
cool. Well, let's start there. I think a great place to start would be talking about how you got into game development, what your game development journey looks like, and kind of just diving into that side. And then I'd love to transition into poker at some point during that conversation, because I also think professional poker player, if that's the title, it's incredibly interesting, and the in between there is also something that's interesting. But let's start with game dev, and we can maybe work our way there naturally as it occurs.
Cool.
So how'd you get into game dev? What's kind of your origin story look like? Your Batman Begins
origin story. I am a I'm a COVID baby. I'm a COVID game dever. So I barely knew anything about programming or game dev related things about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And about 6 years ago, that was kind of the point where
6 years ago now. Oh my gosh.
I know. So this is like right before COVID, right? So I'm kind of going like 1 or 2 years pre-COVID because I think COVID is like 2020, right? So somewhere around 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, I had done like a decent amount of like modding in Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, even a little bit of StarCraft 1 when I was like a teenager. So I'm 37 years old now. And definitely always sort of sprinkled game dev into my life, making board games with friends, stuff like that. But about 6 or 7 years ago, I was like, I want to make a board game. This is like pre-video game dev.
Sure.
Kind of went down that rabbit hole. Let me actually grab it real quick. Because this is a fun little origin story. This is a fun origin story. So about 7 years ago, I made a board game. Can't buy it. It was a failed Kickstarter. And I'm kind of glad that Kickstarter failed, right? So I have one copy, right? There's only one copy in the world. You can't buy it. It was called Heroes of Arcanus. And it's like an okay game. For someone that had no game development knowledge, like it's pretty cool. It's kind of like my take on Munchkin.
Okay.
So I was trying to basically make like a boiled down version of Dungeons and Dragons mixed with like Munchkin elements where you boys basically could like run like a quick little campaign out of a box with, 3 or 4 buddies. I was trying to raise like, I think $20,000 on Kickstarter. During that campaign, that's sort of when I went through that own journey of like, oh my gosh, there's no money in board games. Like that's when I went through that process of like the margins are just razor thin in board games. Like even if I raise $30,000, I'm just giving myself a ton of work and I'm not going to make any money. Like this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So throughout the course of that Kickstarter, I was like sort of being like, I don't really want it to actually fund at this point. It didn't fund largely because I just like didn't actually put that much effort into the campaign after I figured this out. But then I was like, I still want to get into game development. So, over the course of the next couple of years, found game development, started learning online game dev, learning programming, learning the Unity engine. I know the basics of other engines, but I've never really dabbled too far outside of Unity.
Yeah.
And that is sort of where the game dev journey becomes more concrete, learning.
So you
all
get like not afraid, but like the actual business side of a board game and having to upfront money to like Steam takes a 30% cut, but distribution is solved. I don't have to pay Steam $30,000 to distribute my game or partner with a gaming store to sell it. It kind of is just solved for us. So like you kind of ran into the like, oh, if I actually make this game and it sells well, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work and probably a hard breakthrough.
Yeah, like you can actually release an $8 game on Steam and, to be really profitable if you sell enough copies. Like you can't sell an $8 board game. Even if you sell like a $30, $40 board game, like it probably costs about $30, $40 to make unless you're actually making tens of thousands, which if you're like an indie game board developer, I don't even know if that's like an actual title out there.
Probably is.
Your margins are just like nothing. Like you're probably making less money selling a $30 board game as opposed to selling like a $5 game on Steam.
Just because of manufacturing and
shipping.
And then the stores still take their margin cut on selling your product for you on top.
Yeah,
of
and even if you just sell it directly, like there's these third-party websites out there that basically are, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically pay to order. So people, the game only gets made if someone buys it, sort of thing, and then they handle all the shipping. But again, margins are razor thin if you're going to do that. So then the next option is cool. I'm going to be an indie game developer. I have this really cool game that I think is awesome. I'm going to sell it for $60, but now you're just competing with all of the professional $30 to $40 board games. And so it's like, who wants to buy an indie game for $60 when they can just go buy a really good board game?
Yeah, they go to Board Game Geeks, buy the top 50 games, and there's plenty of games in there that are going to be great to play.
So, and that was actually a really cool experience. That was actually sort of like, I think, my first experience as like an adult towards game design. And the game itself is incredibly shallow, but I fell into the trap of there's not a lot of depth, but there's a lot of rules. And that was sort of like my first experience to like learning game design. And it's funny now that I'm going to skip forward a little bit now, but now that we're in 26 and now that I know Unity pretty well and I know programming pretty well, I actually find game design the hardest part. So I've almost gone like full circle in a way.
It's like, what do I make is a really hard question. Once you figure out you can make, the what is the big question, and how to simplify it maybe so there isn't a packet of rules.
So kind of going at 2x speed over the course of the next 6 years, I learned the basics of game development, did my share of game jams. About 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I released my one and only game that I currently have on Steam, which you probably haven't even looked at this point, which is fine. It did really well for it. Let me clarify.
What's the name of the game? First off,
I'll get to that in just a second. Let me clarify a few things. When I say it did really well, it did way better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
So it was a $5 game that sold about just under 2,000 copies. So it made like $10,000 gross before Steam took their cut. It was called Tilecraft. The trailer actually looks pretty good. It has, I think, a total of 50 to 70 reviews on Steam. I can't remember. Nice. It's usually been about $5. It's basically a 2D top-down minimalistic strategy game.
And for someone legitimately showed me that my dev partner legitimately brought this up and said, I love this art style. Not even 2 weeks ago.
Wait, what do you mean? Like just generally speaking, or actually this game?
Literally this game. Like,
wait, what?
The art, I don't know how he found a game like this, but he perused his Steam and he just like popped it. He's like, I really like this art style. I'm like,
wait, but not actually Tilecraft. Literally what? My game. Actually my game.
Literally my dev partner 2 weeks ago sent this.
Oh, well, are you talking about Thornity?
Yes, I am.
Oh, this is, okay, now I know why, is because I had a conversation, I had a conversation. Let me get back to this in a second, but at least I can connect the dots.
I thought the world was doing some serendipity thing. It's just Thornity and you. Okay.
No, there's no universe connection. This is why I was so confused.
I was hoping for it.
There's no game dev god cosmos intervention going on here. So yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, to connect the dots, I had a conversation with Thornity actually 3-ish months ago about a game that I was prototyping that is now in the prototype graveyard, so to speak. But we'll get to that in a second. But that at least makes sense because I talked to him. He probably looked up like maybe a game I had made in the past. And then he was like, oh, by the way, like, Andy, this is something cool.
Yes.
Here's something to use for inspiration.
That does connect the dots. It's just Thornity being prolific in the background, chatting with everybody. So
Yes. Yes. I'm glad I at least connected the dots because that was like really weird to me. So that game actually did really well relative to what I was expecting. Like this is the type of game that I made after learning game dev for a couple years, just as a part-time hobby sort of thing. And so I planned on releasing it and I planned on having it basically sell like 10 copies. So the fact that it sold almost 2,000, I was like, okay, this is awesome. So then I spent the next few years trying to replicate something better, but kept circling back around with game dev education. I've loosely been a member with Game Dev TV now for about 5 years. So I originally reached out about 5 years ago to the Game Dev TV team, largely just because I wanted to be a part of a community. Like this was my first experience learning online game dev. I was learning through Game Dev TV. And I reached out to their team and I was just like, hey, how can I like get more involved? Like that's all the conversation was at the beginning. That is now flourished into me becoming like a main partner with Game Dev TV, which is also something I'm very passionate about. So the large content portion of my time in the last 3 years has been game dev education as opposed to actually trying to make a game. That being said, a little asterisk before I just stop vomiting of the mouth. In 2025, I took a step back from Game Dev TV and Game Dev Online Education, and I was like, I'm actually going to try to make a video game. And about 5 prototypes later, they all hit the graveyard, and I've currently put that aside for the moment.
Sure. So the goals for this year then, what are they? We're at the beginning of this is January still, barely January. I guess we're 2/3 through January, but like, do you have goals for the year? The kind of what's the current vibe?
The next 6 months is going to be close to 100% Game Dev TV related courses, content. There's also a lot of just managerial production related stuff that I also have a passion for.
Yeah.
A lot of just growing a business, you can sort of gamify in a lot of ways. Increasing like the overall value that we're offering and trying to find like a price point that seems fair to people. Like that sort of stuff is just actually something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Largely also because it's not a zero-sum thing. So at some point we'll transition the conversation into poker, and poker in my life has been like a very large lion's share of my income for over 10 years now. But poker is a very zero sum game. Yes. And so to have something that is game dev education where I can build a product and people pay money for it, but it's not zero sum, and that people get value out of it is really exciting to me. And so, you know, being able to sort of gamify that for the next 6 months of 2026 is the primary goal. And then after that, if the time allows, I'd like to circle back around at the second half of this year and see if I can actually whip out a game.
Yeah. I think as I've gotten more into the businessy side of making games, especially in the last, I think a lot of that was the second half of last year, was kind of really taking a step back and saying, how do I run this as a business? That's something that's come up in my head, and something that Thornity and I talk a lot about is how do we make the things we do with other people be a win-win? We want to make money from the product. You want to make money from the product, or whatever the deal and arrangement is. How do you make that both parties are happy with it? It's not one party screwing over the other party in those situations.
And when it comes to actually video game production, to me, that is so intuitive, because at the end of the day, it's a video game and people buy it because they want to play it and get enjoyment out of it. When it comes to something like poker, that's just absolutely zero sum. Like poker's over there's three things in my life, right? There's poker, there's game dev, and then game dev education. And game dev education is a little bit more in the middle, where you want to be able to offer a product that is offering immense value to learn game development. But if you go too far, then you can start to be a little bit scammy, slimy. You know, do you really want to sell a $2,000 online game dev course that only has 8 hours of content? Probably not.
Sure.
So where in the middle can you feel that both parties get a lot of value out of it? And that's something that's important to me. That's something that's important to all of the Game Dev TV team. For, I think, an extremely long time, Game Dev TV has sort of had the reputation that we have really high quality courses for a really low fair price point.
Yeah. And I think that in my head also hits games. Like, a good game is one where the value, the fun, the experience is worth the sticker price. That can go all the way from the game Journey, which is 2 hours to the end, and it's a $10-15 game, but that 2 hours is a magnificent experience, all the way to something more like Slay the Spire, which is a $20 game, or maybe I'll use my own game, Game of Feeding a Black Hole, which is a $5 game that basically has about 5 hours of content, so it's a hour per dollar ratio. Is a little bit more kind of in line.
Man, there's so many things even just off of that one sentence that I'm excited to talk about. The game that I built a few years ago has mixed reviews on Steam, and pretty much every negative review is there's just not enough content.
Yeah.
You can beat the game on a first playthrough and in almost 20 to 25 minutes if you're really trying. That's the game, right? The game is 20 to 30 minutes long at best.
Sure.
And there's just not enough.
Even though I was really good at it, the whole game will be 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of replay value,
Sure.
So that's most of the negative reviews that I got a few years ago. And over the course of the last year, I feel like I've actually created a few prototypes that are loosely promising. The one that I was talking to Thornity about is a game that I was pretty certain was actually going to be the game that I was going to spend 6 months on or so. I probably worked on it for about 2 months. It was gonna be called Saristo, which is Finnish for archipelago. So it was going to be another grid-based but 2D isometric game that had 3D levels to it, so that it was going to be another minimalistic, but this time a strategy game. The other Tilecraft game was sort of a relaxing tile-based strategy game, but you couldn't actually lose. So this game was going to be a more minimalistic strategy game, leaning on a lot of mechanics and game feel from games like Balatro, Game About a Black Hole, have some sort of discoverability mechanic where every time you did a run, it was going to be sort of like a real-time strategy deck builder.
Oh, sure.
That every single time you bid, even though it wasn't going to be a deck with cards, but it was going to be each individual run, you would unlock new cards that would go into your pool of buildings that you could strategically choose to manufacture in a way to get more
unlocking
points.
more and more stuff to do.
Did you ever play He Is Coming?
Yes.
So that sort of vibe, and so instead of an auto battler, it was going to have that sort of pool of cards or abilities or equipment that you could pull from. In this case, it was going to basically be buildings, and then each run would circulate its gameplay.
Like the replayability, it's Slay the Spire does the same thing where like it starts with a small amount of stuff, and then each time you unlock a couple little more things, and Battlefield does the same thing where so you like slowly get more and more complexity in the game and more interest, but then the beginning is nice and tight and almost like a prescribed, here's the best an entry build that you can do.
Yeah, and that was actually the game that I talked to Thornity about a few months ago. And we had a great, just short half-an-hour conversation. He basically gave me the approach of, this is really cool, but I've got a bunch of other things I'm working on right now. Like, let's talk maybe again in a couple months. Yeah. Which I took as him being mainly genuine, but I also took that as a little bit of like a hint, like maybe this actually isn't that good, because if this actually was good enough, maybe he would have stuck his neck out a little bit more and been like, maybe I do need to fit this into my schedule. So I'm not sure exactly where
it's probably somewhere between those two things, right? Because if the idea is that great, then somebody would drop everything, like, let me work on this with you.
Yeah. And the idea was like half baked. You could even see in my elevator pitch as I was describing the game, like I was still in the discoverability phase for what that game was going to be. I mean, we could even share my screen if you really wanted to see it really quickly, but
I'm okay. Mostly because I don't want to have to edit this in the end.
Let's just not even worry about it then. So there's a few games that kind of got into my 2025 prototype graveyard that I put probably about 1 to 2 months into, like, let's call it like half a dozen different projects, like on average, but just never quite found the one that stuck. And I learned a lot along the way, not only from like just a Unity programming related side of things. I've also gone down the VFX tech art rabbit hole lately. Yeah. Specifically like creating low resolution outputs for different shaders in Unity and trying to actually like discover an aesthetic that, you know, can drive my artistic ability in the next few years. Games like A Short Hike, you know, that sort of vibe.
Sure. When you say they made it to the graveyard, is that because they like didn't hit the mark, you didn't see the return on investment, you put it into the, like, you know, on itch or something and didn't see view counts kind of go up? Or is it more like a self-filtering, okay, I don't see this one going any further, I'm going to move on to the next one? Kind of, how does that, when you put something in the graveyard, how does that process look for you?
I'd imagine in theory it would be all of the above, but for me personally, it was all self-filtered. I basically kind of got to the point in each individual project where I would sort of just ask close friends in my game dev circles, you know, like someone like you after this podcast, the next time I have a game that is interesting, I'd shoot it to you. And I just felt like there was never enough engagement from just other game dev creators. So it was just purely self-filtered. I think a couple of them had promise that if I wanted to put in another years worth of dev time, I absolutely probably could have spent somewhere around 6 to 12 months working on one of these games for, let's say, like 30 to 50 hours a week ish, and actually probably even had $10,000 to $20,000 of revenue. Sure. But I'm not really looking to capture $10,000 to $20,000 of revenue for my next game. I feel like I'm past that point in my journey. Like, I'm trying to make a game about feeding a black hole. Like, that's at least what I'm trying to achieve. And if I don't feel like the next game even has a chance of doing that, I'd rather just spend my time elsewhere. Sure.
So like early signs, early indications from even reading through the tea leaves of friendly comments from friends and family, there's a difference between someone being supportive and saying, it's good, like, nice work, versus like someone taking something and being like, I watched my friend play a game about feeding black hole and I was like, I can see this is hitting him in a different way than all the other games I've ever given to him.
There's a difference between giving someone like an itch private demo and having them play it for 7 minutes and being like, that was really cool, man, to being like, wow, dude, I just played it for 90 minutes. Like, what's next? Like, there's a level
is there
of
more
engagement.
Content for me to have yet? And you're like, no. And they're like,
and this is actually sort of like a comment question that I'm excited to share with you. And I wish I knew you like a little bit better, and that I could phrase this in a way that you would know that I'm just like I'm just going to say the way I want to say it.
Yeah,
I think you have a good enough read on me that this will come across the right way.
Okay.
I remember stumbling across your channel, very specifically you, a while ago at this point, like probably 2 to 3 years ago.
Was I wearing a yellow hat?
I don't know. But I remember stumbling across your YouTube channel. I think when Hexagod was in like relatively early development stages. So like how long ago was that? Maybe 2 years?
I started that project in like May of 2024. So yeah, about a little under 2 years ago.
Just under two years then, right?
Yeah.
So let's call it like roughly, I remember stumbling across your channel right around that point.
Yeah.
And just sort of seeing the game and being like, that's not it. Like, that's like, I feel like I have a very good sniff test for these sorts of things. Like, you know how Jonas Tie Roller has his Steam Guesser add-on for Chrome?
Yep.
I would go toe to toe with anyone in the world on that and like feel like I could compete. Yeah. Like, I think there's very, like, this is something I'm just kind of cocky about, right? But like, I think I have like a very good sniff test for like what is commercially viable.
Yeah.
And when I saw Hexagod, I was just like, nah, this isn't it. But like, I wish him the best of luck. But then when I saw a game about feeding a black hole, even in your very beginning stages, and it was like very minimalistic art, I saw it and I was like, oh, I could actually see this going somewhere. And you know, shocker, it did.
Yeah.
There's so many other games like that. I did actually want to ask you how much inspiration you took from games like Nodebuster. I'm assuming you know that game.
I've never played Nodebuster. The big one was Keep on Mining, which I know what Nodebuster is, and I'm familiar with how similar it is. But it's like the biggest inspiration was Keep on Mining because I was trying to find some sort of mechanic that was simple and incremental, and we were trying to make a game so quickly that we wanted something that the market had already validated was fun. And then we both played it. We both played like a couple hours of Keep on Mining, made notes about the points where we got bored and wanted to quit, and then we like kind of went forward with that as a prototype of like, we're grounded in something that works in the market. Let's do our spin on the same idea.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised I haven't run across this Steam page before. One of the games that I was working on was going to basically be like a minimalistic 2D mining game. The problem is I was going to make a platform. I was basically just going to make a worse version of Terraria, right? Like that's the game I was prototyping. So it's like, why would anyone?
That's quite the sales pitch.
Yeah, it's like, come play a worse version of this.
Worse.
Exactly. So I spent like a couple months on this trying to find like a hook, and I just quite never found it. I'm surprised I never stumbled across Keep on Mining, because I think this is actually the direction that an indie should go. If you want to make a mining game, don't make a worse version of Terraria. Make a game like Keep on Mining. Mm-hmm. So I did play, just even for a little bit of context. I went and finally got around to playing a game about a black hole for about 25 minutes yesterday. So I got to the point where I got to like my first unlockable like laser, when you click the things and the laser sort of like, or the electricity.
Yeah.
So I got about 5 minutes past that.
Cool.
And I actually like this game I'm the target audience for this sort of game. I did a little bit of digging last night that you're doing some bundles with, I think it's called Wizard Tower or Tower Wizard. Mm-hmm. I beat that game like this out of my own wanting to just go joyfully play an incremental game. That was one of like the few Steam games that I just played all the way through from start to finish sometime like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
No, not in one sitting. I don't even know if it's possible in one sitting.
How long does that one take to beat?
I had to leave it running overnight like twice. So I don't know actually how long it would take to beat
if you were actively playing
in one sitting. Yeah. But it's like a cookie clicker incremental game, right? So I let my computer run overnight a couple times just to complete the game.
Yeah. That's fair. And I don't take any sort of I'm not like offended that Hexagod didn't work well, because I also am, that's the big learning with like Hexagod was like, the gameplay is fun. You get into it, play it, it's a good time. The packaging is absolutely terrible. And that's where Game About Feeding a Black Hole was like, the whole thing from the conception of the idea, from literally the first thing I had was a name, was a game about feeding a black hole. I'm like, from the beginning, I want this to be something within seconds of hitting the Steam page, you know exactly if you want to play it or not. Like, I wanted to try to make it as clear as possible.
Yeah, being able to just like establish that contract with the player before they even buy the game.
Yeah. What's the hook? What's the fun? It's I sat on my stream last week on Friday, and we just looked through Steam pages, and it's crazy how many games have a hook and bury the lead. Like, so many of them.
It's hard to bring
watch
it
the
to
whole
the
trailer.
surface,
I'm like, this game looks good. It looks fun. Why is that hook at 45 seconds into the trailer?
My absolute favorite example of this, I think it came out in 2025. It might have even come out in 2024, but it's called just a game about digging a hole.
Yep. Also inspiration for the name.
Totally. And that when I saw that trailer before it got released, that's like one of those games where you see the trailer as an indie game developer and you're like, God, why didn't I think of that? Like some of these things are just like so obvious. But when I saw that trailer before they launched it, I was like, this game is absolutely going to kill it. Because it just, within the first like second of the trailer, you just know everything you need to know about the game and you're like, I'm in. Yeah. And I went and bought the game. I played it. I think that game, same thing. I think that game took me like less than 2 hours to beat in a single sitting, but it was awesome. I absolutely would give them $5 again if I could experience that again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, as a kid, I grew up in Minnesota, and we'd go to northern Minnesota in our cabin, and we'd spend time just literally digging a hole, like for no purpose, just to dig a hole. And I'm like, there's something intrinsic about humans wanting to dig.
Yeah, and like I am just not short on ideas at all. I'm going to be a little bit dramatic and like see if I can actually like be dramatic. I'm pulling something up on my phone right now. Yeah, so here we go. So this is over the years. I just keep a list on my phone, like if I'm just out and about on a walk or something like that, and I just, just like you, I have just silly ideas pop in my head all the time. Yeah. I mean, this is how many game dev ideas I have. Like I don't even know. That was probably I don't know. It's probably somewhere in between like 1 to 200. Just
that's ideas. A lot of ideas.
There's probably only like 24 in there that are actually like good. And then maybe only out of those good ideas, maybe there's only actually a dozen that are marketable. And so it's
and like, then of them, there's like one that you could execute actually. Cause that's also that's like all these ideas are great, but then it's like your time, your constraints, your resources, which one can you actually see to the end? Yeah. And see executed in a way where it does that idea justice. And that's
like I have this really strong desire to basically just go, and I know I'm not alone in this with what I'm about to say, but a short hike has always been inspiring to me, is like the indie game that just is a small open world top-down 3D platformer about getting to the top of a mountain, but they just do it in a sort of cutesy way. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to just go put my own take on a game like that. That's kind of actually what I'm experimenting with lately, just in my own personal time.
Yeah.
But I also know I'd have to dedicate probably close to 2 years worth of dev time to actually execute on the idea well.
Sure.
Do I really want to dedicate 2 years of my life to developing something like that? That's, and that's like what you say. I'm not actually sure.
Yeah, and it's hard to start zooming out and thinking about it from that perspective. And like, I've found that business tension has been very helpful. That like figuring out return on investment, all these different things has been a helpful mechanism to push me to make the decision that is a return on investment, or something where, if I put in 300 hours to a game about feeding a black hole, this idea will at least net me some sort of either crazy education that'll teach me something, or it'll be like, I've only put 300 hours into it, so it only needs to make $20,000 to break even on some sort of like return on investment there.
All right, so I've got sort of an abstract question for you that I'm really excited to ask you. We may have to qualify the question after I ask it for viewers a little bit. It's not like it's an overly complicated question, but I want you to internalize what I'm about to ask a little bit. Now that you've made it, you did it, a game about fleeing a black hole. Hell yeah. Congrats. Yeah. Like genuinely from like the deepest of my hearts. It's awesome.
Thank you.
I feel like you freaking did it. Hell yeah. The question is, what do you think your expected value is in 2026? Do you think you can replicate a game about feeding a black hole in 2026? And if so, there's a lot of variance to game dev. And this is where I want to segue this sort of question. There's a lot of variance. A lot of people call it luck in game dev. I don't call it luck. I'm a poker player, so I call it variance. There's a lot of variance in indie game development. So like over the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're probably going to have another year where you make $500,000, and then you might have another year where you only make $50K, right? So what do you think is your expected value in 2026 now that you've made a game about feeding a black hole, and can you replicate it?
All I can say is I know it's positive. I think there's positive expected value now. The variance on that is huge. I think that's what this game showed me, is that I am capable of doing something that does net $500,000 in gross revenue in the first month. Like, that's something you asked me this literally January of last year, but absolutely not. Like, the odds of that are so astronomically low for me at that point. But
yeah, but now I actually don't think it's that low.
Yeah,
like,
maybe
I don't think
my
it's
priors
high.
were wrong. Maybe my priors were incorrect of the odds of that happening, given my experiences. Maybe there's lessons I learned along the way that can help me get there. Looking at the year, there's stuff we can do now that we have some money coming in from this, and that's like taking some small bets that might be in the short term actual minus money, but like plus value for us as like developers, like just doing small things here and there, like spending money on Reddit ads to understand what that can do for wish lists, and starting to like work with other developers, and just a bunch of little things that were like, let's take like, let's maybe work on console porting and partner with somebody to do that. And maybe that doesn't yield, but like, all I know is that like for me in the next year, it's going to be a positive year, because at the worst case scenario, say we throw away $50,000 on small little bets. I know the return on investment will be something that's educational for us in the long run. Yep. And ideally those bets themselves will yield at least a break even on their money.
Dude, it's been fun to watch. I haven't followed your journey too closely.
Yeah.
But there is no way you would have said what you just said like 3, 4, 5 years ago. Like, it's incredible how far you've come, I think, in your own journey. And maybe you would have, and maybe I'm just ignorant, but it's one of those things where I can't remember the right word what I want to say, but basically like the whole idea of like an overnight success is never really an overnight success. You know, it's been like years of learning.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you get a game about feeding a black hole and you just hit a home run. I love that you're going to take, you know, a portion of that revenue and invest it into your own education and learning. Like, yeah, some of the things you said may or may not work, but like, you don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And it's good experience for us in the long run to be able to have a robust tool set that, we need 2,000 more wish lists before the next fest begins. Yeah, remember when we did that Reddit ad and it actually yielded, it was $1 per wish list? That seems like a pretty low amount of money to guarantee you get to a threshold before the next fest begins. Stuff like that will be helpful. If you had asked me this last year and said, when will you become profitable? Like I still think post Hexagod, my mindset was, if I make 3 more Hexagod success games, Hexagod hasn't had that much success. It sold probably like $11,000 to $12,000. But it has had some compounding. Like, you could see each game you put out, you can get a longer tail of sales. And if you start stacking these long tail of sales, eventually you become profitable. And it's like 5 games at kind of this like sell between 1,000 to 5,000 copies, and you can kind of scratch out a living as a solo developer. You don't have to do this because the overhead's so low. You don't have to have these overnight successes to do it well. So that was the long game hope, was like, okay, Hexagod flopped. Let's try to make another game by the end of the year, and let's do it really quickly so that at a bare minimum, I have a low time investment, and then whatever the value is high. And then I would consider it that high variance. We rolled like natural 20s a couple times to have the game go viral.
What do you think were the biggest factors into helping it go viral? Was there actually like a big content creator that played it at any point, or are you just talking like the algorithm gods from Steam picked it up?
We definitely created opportunities for, we had a lot of dice rolls. That's probably it, is like, we had a lot of moments where we tried to engage different algorithms, whether that's getting validation by bringing it to itch, whether that's sending out a big wave of content creator emails, whether that's me simply reaching out to Orbital Potato, who was the first YouTuber to play it, because he had played Hexagod and I had kind of messaged him back and forth, and like having somebody start it, and then having Gray Still Plays play it, and then all these kind of, I think when a crit happened, we were watching and aware, and then fanned the flame of that to like really have it kind of catch fire. And I guess in a D&D term, if you roll a crit and your DM doesn't give you something fun, you kind of poke the DM and say, hey, it was a crit.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit more info here, right? Like,
I was never a huge D&D player, but I was a Warhammer player in my teenage years. So, you know, I've rolled my share of dice.
Perfect.
That's actually, I love the lens that you're looking at it, as opposed to, I think, some other game developers, which is you gave yourself a chance to roll as many dice as possible, where I feel like a lot of indie game developers, or even like probably AA or even AAA developers to a degree. Maybe this isn't true for them, but they view game development in the lens of like one dice roll. Like, I'm going to release a game on Steam and see how it goes. And I just don't see it that way at all. And this is actually kind of getting back to, you know, how much variance there is in something like poker as opposed to game development, where in poker you play hand after hand after hand, and over the course of a year you might even play tens of thousands of hands, not including, you know, online poker. I'm getting too much into the weeds, but you're going to give yourself a lot of chances to just make good decisions. And sometimes it's going to go your way and sometimes it's not. And the more opportunities as a game developer that you just give yourself a chance to roll the dice, and if you're rolling positive expected value or plus EV dice, you're giving yourself a chance to at least ride the upper echelons of standard deviation variance samples.
And that's the hard thing, I think, for me that I'm going to have to learn here, is that maybe I've already learned it with Chess Survivors being pretty successful at this point, like 35,000 over 3 years. Not great, not bad. You know, I'd take a portfolio full of Chess Survivors, to be honest with you. That'd be awesome. Hexagog coming down, low flop variance, and then coming back to the game about feeding a black hole, they're really high end. The hard thing is that some things are going to fail, and it's going to just happen because low rolls on outcomes.
So have you changed over in your next 3 years, are you going to try to stick to releasing, you know, 1 to 2 games a year? Or are you ever going to give yourself a chance to, you know, go create a 3, 4, 5 year project and roll one big old fat dice?
I really don't want to. I'm a little bit more like financially conservative as a person. I'm less, which is crazy. Like, I'm not like a big risk taker, but I also quit my job to go and pursue full-time game development. I don't know. Yes, it's attractive as an idea to say, well, I could go and hire artists. I could hire all these different people and programmers, and we could maybe try to create a game. But you can also go find plenty of stories of people who were in my shoes who made a game that was really big and then went and gambled it all away, and now they're back doing a full-time job again. So I can see a place where we're doing smaller bets, a lot of small little bets where we're learning, we're growing, we're trying to figure out what is a plus EV bet. You know, if we make 5 minus EV bets and they all flop, that might be it for us. But if we can figure out how to find ones where it does feel like that plus EV, where you can look at that. I just want to remind the viewer, EV is expected value. We're going to keep saying that a lot here. But an expected value bet that is going to be a positive return on investment. That's what I want to do. I want to become kind of savvy with that sort of like business investment mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely going about it the right way. And I definitely have. I've considered, even so, when you asked me like my goals for 2026, if the next 6 months goes the way that I think it will, not necessarily making $1 bajillion or anything along those lines, but just basically the time allowance of what I think the next 6 to 7 months of my life looks like. I've even considered the second half of this year going and hiring a small team so I can continue focusing on game dev, TV related things and game dev education, but maybe in the background, I go hire one programmer, one artist, and then I sort of oversee a personal project of some kind. So that way I don't necessarily need to put 50 hours a week into it to actually get it across the finish line.
Yeah.
I can go hire 2 people to put in 50 hours a week to get it across the finish line while I spend, 20 hours a week trying to bring something to life. I don't know if that's going to happen in 2026, but I think actually the likelihood of me doing something like that in the next few years is pretty high.
Why do you say that?
Like in the light of why not sooner or why not later?
Why do you think the likelihood is high?
I feel very confident that one of my biggest life goals is to create a game that not only brings me joy, but brings a lot of other people joy. I don't really care too much about creating a game that, 7 people really like. It's just not something that matters to me. But even something like, if I could go create a game that cost $8, that tens of thousands of people played, and I got overwhelmingly positive on Steam, that for whatever reason is a very important goal of mine in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So I have a few different paths I think I can take on achieving that goal. And I think one of those options is because I have other things to me that are also important in life, work, poker, family, exercise, and other hobbies. I think one of the more viable paths is cool, go hire a very small team and try to make that a reality.
Yeah. Offset your time is the limiting factor for all of humans. And so offset your time with a little bit of investment in capital.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the path to that would probably be, well, I'll continue to prototype things until I find what I feel very confident is that thing.
Yeah.
So I'll go do that for at least minimum a few months, probably even closer to 3 to 6 months. And then finally, once I get to the point where I've reached like the 80-20 rule and I'm like, cool, I think I'm like 80% of the way done through the game.
Yeah.
Go take an additional 80% to, get to the final steps by saying like hiring an artist or like getting a programmer to create the systems I need to actually make this come to life. Yeah.
You're waiting for the poker hand that you want to go all in on. Maybe not all in. That's probably too dramatic of a push.
Yeah, but something like that. Yeah. No, I think it's at least like a nice analogy.
Yeah.
Because if
you're
I
waiting
don't
for that and the table position to be correct so that you can be in the right place to take advantage of it and like.
Yeah. So Nate Silver, I've never actually played with him, but I've played next to him. Cool. So, like at the World Series of Poker, at the end of the day, you're all just in one giant big room. I'm sure you've probably seen the pictures of just like thousands of people playing poker in like a giant arena, basically. And that's something I've gone to every year for probably only 6 or 7 years. I actually really haven't played poker for too long compared to some of my friends that have been playing since they were teenagers, basically.
Sure.
What is the book that you read? Was it like a political book? Because I know Nate Silver is like a political figure. I know he runs like the website that is the exact amount of electoral college votes.
It used to be 538. It's no longer a thing.
Okay.
They sold it to ABC at some point, and then ABC shuttered it in the last year. But he now runs a blog called Silver Bulletin, and his most recent book is called On the Edge, and it's talking all about like risk taking, and he does that from a perspective of talking about expected value bets in poker, but also then he like talks to like Sam Bankman-Fried and talks about his risk taking with building like FTX and stuff like that. Incredibly interesting.
Turns out that one didn't work out for Sam, but I'm sure there's a lot for Sam.
But even Nate's like I was listening to his podcast and he's like, this book was a top role for him. It was like he's like this is a top 95% outcome because he's like he talked to Sam Bankman-Fried during 2022, and so this was going to be a footnote chapter, but he is like the whole second half of the book uses this as a framing of where this risk taking can go wrong, and this really interesting political figure of this impressive fallout made his book like actually really compelling to read and really timely for something that probably like he loves poker. Poker's really interesting. I'm more interested in poker now after reading the book, but like probably wouldn't have had as massive appeal. So even he's like in the context of expected value bets is like this bet really paid off as far as writing this book about the topics.
One of the most frustrating things about being a poker player is the rest of the world views everything in such a results-oriented way, meaning that people constantly either get kicked if they have a bad result or praised if they get a good result. But poker players just don't tend to see the world that way. Like there's definitely like an argument out there that Sam and FTX is probably not the best example, but there's so many things in life where maybe you actually just did roll a bunch of plus EV dice, but sometimes you just roll poorly.
Ones pop up, yeah.
And it can be really hard to differentiate your own bias from those sorts of decisions. And game dev is like the perfect example of something like this, where it's one of the reasons that in 2026, you're probably better off as an indie game developer to choose all of these small projects, because if a game today would crush it because you went and built some friend slop game that if it was to release today, maybe it would actually do very well, but it took you 2 years to build. And maybe in 2028, these games aren't popular anymore, was that actually like a plus EV decision? It's hard to differentiate your own bias.
It really is. And it's hard to, I think one of the things that I'll find challenging and I'll be interested in, I want to hear from poker perspective is like, you do low roll a bunch of times and you do have these really unfavorable outcomes. There's definitely, I imagine there's a threshold between where it's like, I made mistakes. I made strategical bad decisions, whatever, like me doubling down on working on Hexagon longer. I can look back and be like, I probably could have learned the same things from that game and done it in half the time. Versus just saying, well, I put in the market didn't want it, it was bad timing, whatever. It wasn't, I did nothing wrong in this situation. How does that work in poker where there is a lot of variance and a lot of, different outcomes? How do you look back at something and say, well, I also just had bad odds and bad outcomes? I guess, does that question make sense?
Yes, and it's changed a lot in the last 7 or 8 years in poker, because poker has gone the direction of what's referred to as solvers, or a solver-based game. So 7, 8, 9 years ago, before Go, the game Go was solved, or before chess was, chess has sort of been the front runner, or the game Go has been sort of the front runner for a lot of these. I can't remember, they're not using large language models, but they're using whatever the precursor was to a large language model to basically solve the game tree. Poker has really heavily gone that direction in the last 7 or 8 years, where if me and you are basically buddies playing poker at the World Series of Poker 15 years ago, we were chatting in the halls of, a specific play that I made, and like subjectively, what did you think? Oh, that's interesting. What did I think? Nowadays, it's really gone the direction of let's just look up the answer on a computer. And then it sort of gives you the theoretical correct answer. Now, what's still really fun about poker, in my opinion, is even though you might have the theoretical based answer, or what's referred to as the game theoretical optimal choice. It's what we call GTO for short in the poker streets.
Yeah, I know these terms from the book now.
Yeah, so game theoretical optical, and it's not just a poker term, right? Like there's like the Nash equilibrium is like the father of GTO, his like World War II post Soviet Union, nuclear bombings between the United States and Russia. That was like where a lot of like game theory sort of originally started to pop up. So that term is just very tightly used in poker to explain the game tree being solved in theoretical land. However, if I'm a professional poker player playing a $3,000 tournament in the World Series of Poker, and I'm playing against John Barbecue from Texas, he's not going to be playing in an optimal way. And so it's up to me to find where he's deviating too far from his strategy without even knowing that he's deviating from an optimal path, and how I can properly exploit that. So you can still go look up the answers in what's referred to as a solver, basically. And then it's up to you as the human to sort of extrapolate that knowledge down into how I can actually properly exploit this specific opponent.
So even there's these quote unquote like the optimal strategy given all of the constraint, all of the input variables. There's still the human touch of having to make that decision in the context of the people who are at the table, because there's still a bunch of humans sitting there who were notoriously imprecise instruments.
And poker is just an incredibly complicated game. So just like chess, right? Like you would never say to Magnus Carlsen, like, how should I phrase this? Chess is solved, right? Just because chess is solved doesn't mean that you as a human can't get better. Poker, like chess, is an incredibly complicated game, and you could easily, like chess, study poker for the rest of your life, and you will absolutely still have something to learn, which is one of the reasons, poker is so fun. And the game tree just gets more and more complicated. So if you're familiar with a game like, No Limit Texas Hold'em, which is the most popular game of poker, and there's a flop, turn, and river, the pre-flop streets are the most simplistic. Those are the ones that you could study as a relatively even beginner in poker and sort of like nail down some of the basic nuances relatively quickly. But the game gets progressively more complicated the more streets, like the flop, turn, and river, that you get, and it can be impossible for a human to ever execute on these things properly.
So the more information that enters the system, as far as like what cards are flipped over during poker, like dramatically changes and makes it more complicated?
Yes and no. Actually, from a solver basis, it's the opposite. And I realize what I just said kind of is true in both ways. So you as a human, you have to remember the complexity of a game tree as more decisions are made. But you can sort of even think about from the very beginning, let's even just say something like pre-flop, there's actually more unknown variables. So a solver in computer land takes a longer time to solve a poker problem pre-flop than it does post-flop. Like just the computational power that a very strong computer takes to solve some of these problems can sometimes even take weeks for a computer to just literally run through until it finds an equilibrium. But later in the streets, it can be harder for a human because you're basically taking all of these input variables that the computer has already solved for you, and the output is really hard to nail down correctly as a human. But technically, from a solver point of view, the more input you give the computer, the faster it spits out an output.
Sure. But then that's harder for us as humans.
It's harder for the human.
Process.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is then easier for other people to look up from the outside in and say, well, you clearly played wrong there. We're like, yeah, but you had the solver in your hand.
Yeah, and it can be and what's so fun about poker is all of these inputs just change so quickly. I mean, even something as simple as just me and you playing in a hand, which is what's referred to as like a heads up hand. If you're, there might be 8 people at the table, but me and you and get involved in a hand from 2 different positions. It can be relatively easy just to go to a solver and say, okay, I used this bet size on the flop and this bet size on the turn, and then he check raised on the river. What do I do? And the solver will give you an answer relatively quickly. But how are you supposed to take that exact board structure and apply it to a future problem? There's an infinite amount of problems that you're going to really get.
Right.
So it's
Even
all about
how many chips do they have? How many chips do you have? Like, how many chips do the people who aren't participating in that hand have? Well, they're watching you play this hand. There's so many, like, I think that's the interesting thing about reading the book that stands out to me too, is like, you can have this strategy, but you also then need to be random. You need to not create your own patterns because other people are watching for your pattern. And so it's like, he said there's like little tips of like, look at the clock and based off of the final digit, make a choice. Like, so if you're at a position where there are 3 opportunities, he's like, randomize it in some way so you can have some other input variable, which is the digit on the clock, can help you randomize your thing, because humans we're not random. We don't act randomly. That we have some sort of a pattern.
Yeah, see, I didn't think we were going to talk about randomizing in poker when I got on this podcast, but it's fun that you have read into it that far to kind of realize, like,
it's a good book.
A very common strategy used when it's basically professional versus professional is to find what the equilibrium decision might be and then randomize your choice within the constraints of that equilibrium. So if I know that I'm supposed to call 66% of the time and I'm supposed to fold a third of the time, you might randomize in a way to basically reach that equilibrium.
And this is where I want to bring it back to game development. Yeah. This is something where I want to try to get to that understanding, and I'm like becoming almost like aggressively trying to figure this out of where, what is my return on investment, and trying to nail down more like what do we think those percent chances will be, and then knowing that some of those times we do need to fold and move on. We shouldn't take an idea that gets validated somewhere on the market, gets told it's, this is probably 50-50 going to work out on Steam or not. And that means half the time we should not take that bet and half the time we should take that bet. And like, that's where I'm like, how do I try to squeeze out more understanding from poker to be like, which bets do you actually start making? Yeah.
And there's even like a asterisk I would put on one of the things you just said, is that if something is worth it 50% of the time, and that something might not be worth it the other 50% of the time, that actually does not mean that you should do it 50% of the time. It means that it doesn't matter, right? That's like the distinction I would put on the way that you phrased it from a game theoretical
because the outcome is literally either it's a coin flip.
The expected value is $0, right? Like in this theoretical way of thinking, like if something works out 50% of the time.
If it's 51.49, then I'd have now there's an actual expected value on it.
Okay, here's a quiz question for you. Like just in game theoretical land, if something is worth it 51% of the time, how often should you do it? Not taking into consideration time constraints.
An infinite number of times?
Yeah, like you should just do it, right? So that's one of like my favorite. Like there's what's referred to in poker as toy games. Have you ever heard of that phrase before?
When it's probably in passing.
It's like a mind just exercise.
Yeah.
And there's a relatively simple one where if you're playing a computer that at rock, paper, scissors, and they're perfectly randomizing between rock, paper, and scissors, 1/3 of the time each, how can you beat the computer? You can't.
Pick the same thing the whole time.
It doesn't matter. That's the whole point of basically playing a defensive strategy.
It's perfectly random, yeah.
It's perfectly random, right? It doesn't matter if you're perfectly random yourself or you throw rock every time. It just doesn't matter, right? Like you're never actually going to make any headway against a computer that's randomizing perfectly, right? But if a computer, if you notice, like let's say, whether it's a game dev example or a poker example, but we'll just use this abstract example for now. But the second the computer starts randomly throwing rock 34% of the time, and the other two 32.5% of the time, what is your optimal choice?
You then start throwing paper because now you have an edge.
Every time.
Yeah.
That's like a really interesting distinction about poker is the second you find one of these, what we call leaks in an opponent's strategy, you don't do it sometimes. Like, of course, it's more nuanced in poker than this, because as soon as they realize what you're doing, then they're going to change their strategy. But I think bringing that sort of conversation back to game dev, as soon as you find what works, it doesn't mean you should do it sometimes. Like you should, in theory land, it's more complicated than this, but in theory land, you should do it every time.
We should be smashing a game about fleeing a black hole button and just pressing that button as many times until it stops working.
In theory land, right? Now, of course, is that there's a really interesting video that Jonas Tyroller made about, like fishing, and it was like a boat that was in the center and it was going
my brain. Absolutely.
Same.
Yeah. I like watching, I'm like, God, this is so
well is
presented.
A game, is an incremental game about feeding a black hole, like, is it the most EV decision? Who it's hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also our sanity as humans that I need to, as like a creative person, I'm like, can I just keep, grinding that mill? And like, these are all interesting thoughts.
really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I love game theory, any sort of conversations, you can see that I'm like passionate about it. And I like you, I'm really excited as soon as I get better at game development and better at game design. I'm excited to start pulling on some of these levers that you're already now getting to pull. Like, I'm definitely envious that you get to start pulling some of these levers that I feel like I'm not quite ready for yet.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for me is it's so I don't know how to quantify a lot of this stuff other than I suppose we could start doing things of like, how many wish lists can we get, and then trying to understand how many wish lists does that create in the future, and then plugging that into like basic kind of variance outcomes for wish list conversion rates and stuff. And then we can start actually kind of maybe nailing down some numbers on some of these, like, because like I think the thing is, like, even if it's like a 20% outcome that the bet hits, what if that's $1 million?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's hard, because it's like, not everything's going to be 50-50. And yes, if it's a 51-49, you should take that bet. But it's like, there's also plenty of bets out there that are going to be like a 10% chance that this happens, but that is a $10 million game or a $0 game. And like,
yeah, but that also goes full circle to what you said before, which is even if you roll a positive EV dice 5 times, but you strike out every time, you could just go out of business, right? So there's also how much variance there is in each dice roll. Just because if you roll a dice roll, and if you roll 100-sided dice and you roll 100 and you make $1 million, does that actually mean, you should roll the dice? Like, I'm not sure. Like, can someone's life withstand the variance of rolling a positive EV high variance dice?
I don't know. And this is literally some of the stuff that I'm trying to figure out right now is like, okay, I have a game that's been successful, and I like, now what?
Well, here's what's so exciting for you. Here's what's so exciting is you get to choose. Like, before,
yeah.
a year ago, I guarantee if we were having this podcast, I guarantee a year ago, if we had this podcast, you didn't have as many choices. Like, you had to go create, a couple like low budget, quick turnaround games to, live. But now you actually have the luxury of, if you wanted to, you could go take a potentially higher variance route and, go try to hit a grand slam. What is it that you want to do next? Have you already started prototyping your next game?
The prototype of the next game is based in a prototype I made back in 2024, which is a little mining game. So your version of Terraria but worse, and I would say it's Terraria but less. It's Terraria but heavy incremental vibes, not boss fighting, not anything like that. It's purely like a go children yearn for the mine, go mine, get resources, get more powerful, mine more, and loop through that. But that prototype was
where
really
I was
fun.
going with mine. I should actually just, after this call, so you don't have to edit it, I should actually just show you mine real quick, and maybe it would even lead to just like a little bit of inspiration for you, because it kind of was supposed to be that. But I just felt like I couldn't quite crack the nut.
Sure. But that idea is based off of a prototype from 2024 that was like pre-Hexagod that wanted to become more of a ARPG type game with like item crafting and like all of these like mods that gets rolled and stuff. It became really too big really too quickly, and that's where I pulled back to Hexagod, which then also became too big, which then I pulled back to Black Hole, and now we're here again. So it's like ripping out all that stuff and taking lessons learned from Black Hole and trying to basically like diversify the risk because we've gained some proficiencies in incremental and do it again quicker, more efficiently, and take that skill and hopefully have the dice. I guess in this case, it'd be like a lower variance die we're rolling.
I feel like a lot of incremental games are a little bit more like solvable, in the realm of like, if we just talk about like solvers, like an incremental game on Steam with the variables that we can control. I feel like an incremental game like that has a relatively reasonable output result that you can at least like try to intuit from.
Yep. We have a formula that we think is a huge plus EV, and we're going to try to do it again.
Go do it like go do it 2 or 3 times, make a bunch of money, and then after that be like, okay, I'm sick of incremental games.
Yeah. And I'm not sick of it at this point yet.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there will be a point where I want to do something differently, and something differently probably just looks like making like a dredge game or Dave the Diver, which is like a little bit bigger, a little bit slower. Like it is incremental still, but it's like a little bit different than incremental at the same time.
Okay, when you asked me like what my 2026 goals were and like what my like long-term game dev goals, if I can ever make a game like Dredge, I can die happy. Like cool. if at least from the game dev part of my life.
That's your magnum opus then is something like that. That gives you the same feeling. Is that it?
A game of that scope that is commercially successful.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be that like grungy fishing game. I'm not trying to like necessarily go for that vibe, but I remember when I played Dredge a few years ago at this point, whenever it first came out, and I was like, a relatively new game developer, and I went and looked into like how many people built the game, which I think is like 3 or 4 people plus, however many contract workers.
Yeah.
If I can ever build a game of that scope, man, that is like the goal I think I'm shooting for. I'm not going to be able to do something like that in 2026, but I just absolutely, Dredge might even be, I'm glad you mentioned Dredge, because as far as like what I would consider kind of indie game development or what might be considered AA game development, like Dredge is just like my North Star.
Yeah. I think it's a very well done game that feels like, again, I've only played it for a couple hours, maybe even just an hour and a half or so, but I'm like, as I was playing, I was like, you can't really remove anything. Like it's clean, it's tight, and what is there is done really well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the game even just gets, I loved it, right? So I played the whole game. I didn't like play any DLC, but I played all the way through the story, and I just loved it. It was like one of like my favorite gaming experiences I've had in the last like 5 years. That I in a group call that we recently had, you were mentioning games like TFT or World of Warcraft, and I've played my share of those games. I still hop on TFT once in a while because it's also kind of like my guilty pleasure game that I feel like I can play while I watch other podcast related game dev content. But as far as like single player experiences that I've had, Dredge is up there as far as like some of the best gaming experiences I've had in the last 5 years.
I think for me, my answer for that best gaming experience in the last 5 years is probably Noita.
It's on my wish list.
Noita is I'm an ARPG player, and so there's like weapon crafting, like spell crafting mechanics in there, and just the engine they built and all. I'm like, this seems like a masterpiece of a game that I suck at. I'm not good at that game. I've never even beat it, but I'm like, gosh, that game, something about it, I'm like, this is just so well executed as an idea.
So I think I have like 12 or 13 games on my wish list right now, and Noita is one of them. Absolutely. Like I'll absolutely pick it up one day, but I just know that whenever I do pick it up, I want to be able to like put a little bit more than like 30 minutes into it.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, one day my wife and son will go out of town for whatever reason, like on a girls trip or something, and that's the weekend that I'm going to play Noita.
Let me go be a wizard who crafts spells and wands and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so with poker, I have a maybe a harder question. I don't know. With so much variance and doing it, you said at one point it was like a big part of your income. How does that feel?
Is
okay. How does that feel to have this like really high variance thing being part of your one of your main income sources?
How does it feel for you? Do you have an answer for me while I think of mine?
It's hard because
you're now in that camp.
You're now in the same camp. Yeah, it's the opposite where it's like I just won a World Series of Poker. It feels like, and now I can rest on the laurels a little bit. That's a good point. I guess game dev is also high variance.
I 100%, and it's a conversation that I've wanted to have on a podcast like this for a long time because there is just an insane amount of variance to game dev. So not to dodge your question, I'm also just on the upswing, in life, like work's going well, poker's going well.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, and so at some point in the future, hopefully not anytime soon, life is hard and there'll be a downswing at some point, and hopefully it's just money related and it's not, something else worse than that. And I might have a different answer. So, you ask those questions at different points in people's life. And just a couple months ago, I won a relatively big tournament. I don't know if you saw that on Google anywhere.
I didn't Google you. Should I have? Am I a bad host?
No, not at all.
You literally came into the Discord call and was like, he seems like a cool person. I want to talk with him.
Yeah, I mean, if I say just Google Stephen Hubbard poker right now, does it come off like sort of?
I don't
feels
know.
Like it comes off a little bit.
If you won a poker tournament,
arrogant.
that seems like a non-trivial thing to do.
Yeah, so about 2.5 months ago, I won a relatively big tournament.
Congratulations.
Which I'm very excited about, and so I will continue to play poker this year. I'll probably play poker less in 2026 than I did in 2025 because I'd like to just, shift, I think, my goals this year a little bit more towards game development education, game dev, TV related stuff, as well as just personal game dev projects. But it's been interesting.
I want to know why. Before you keep going, why? Yeah. Why do you want to shift away from poker?
Sometimes I don't know the answer to that question. Poker actually does just get old sometimes. Like you can imagine, like even just put yourself in the seat of like sitting in a poker chair, whether it's at a casino or a private game.
Yeah.
Like imagine just doing that.
It's a lot of hours it sound like from Nate's book. It's like even to get to the final table of most tournaments, it's a marathon where you're having to try to make good decisions while you're hungry and tired and you want to see the outside. Like all of a sudden he's like, you as a human, your decision capabilities go down right as it's really important to make good decisions.
Yeah, and it's where I think I actually get a lot of my edge is like I do well in those moments where you get to the point where you've been playing poker for days in a row for 12 hours at a time and everyone else is tired. And even though you might have 8 people at the table and 6 of them are very, very good poker players, who's actually going to execute the best in the moment? Yeah. There's a lot of like that human element to it as well. Like, yeah, maybe if everyone was well rested and well fed and they exercised in the morning and they meditated, like maybe we're all on even keel, but who's actually going to execute better in the moment? That's still like a very human element to poker that I just love.
Yeah. I've always liked to say that I'm a really good human as long as all my needs are met.
Yeah. Yeah, same. And poker throws a lot of those curveballs at you when you're just tired and someone's betting an insane amount of chips. And like, what if let's say first place is just a lot of money and 6th place is a lot of money, but not nearly as much as first place. A lot of poker is just making the best decision irrespective of the money, but actually just trying to make the best plus EV decision. And I think I do that better than some others. And that's a very hard thing to execute on. More specifically, to answer your question a little bit more specifically, I've probably played poker now for about 10 years. I've only really taken it super seriously for about 7 or 8. And without exception, I've made more money from poker every year than I did in the previous year. However, I was pretty sure 2025 was going to be the first year where I messed that up. Where I thought for sure in 2025 and until basically November of last year when I won a poker tournament. And I actually won 2 poker tournaments in 2025, but
So was the year not doing well, or did you have some other sense that you were doing what?
I was still winning.
Okay.
I just wasn't winning as much as I wasn't on track to win as much as I won in 2024.
And you thought that the year would just end less because you're like I was lower variance as a year, or was something changing?
No, I just mean that I won a set amount of money in 2024, and that in November of 2025, meaning towards the very end of the year, I wasn't nearly close enough to the number that I had in 2024, and I was like, oh, I only have 2 months left. Like, I'm probably not going to make a whole bunch of money in the next 2 months. But then I won like back-to-back tournaments and ended up, just riding the coattails of a very, very good year. So like, how does it feel to do something with like an insane amount of variance? There's two different types of poker, right? There's cash game poker and tournament poker.
Cash game is just like at a table. There's no next table. It's just you're playing and okay.
Yeah, you buy in for whatever set amount.
You hope there's some fish at the table that you can, or some whales at the table you can take advantage of,
and you buy in for, there's different stakes, right? You can buy in for in the low hundreds of dollars, or it goes up to just an infinite amount of money, like at the highest stakes, right? And so you just sit down at a cash game table for whatever stake you want to play, and you're allowed to just stand up and be done whenever you want. In a tournament, like only 15% of the time, like about 15 to 20% of the time, are you actually going to like cash the tournament?
Yeah.
So it's actually very relatable to the dice that you were rolling before, where you might roll a 5-sided dice, but you need to roll a 1 to actually be plus EV. Mm-hmm. In a tournament, you're only actually going to win 15 to 20% of the time, meaning that it's a very high variance way to potentially make money. And that's also only if you like actually theoretically think you're good enough to have an edge. One of like the human elements to poker is everyone tends to think they have an edge.
Yeah. So
and in a zero-sum game that also has rake, realistically, only like a much smaller portion actually have an edge. And so all of that being said, even after all is said and done, can you show up day after day expecting to lose, and every once in a while you're going to win? It's hard mentally to get through at first for, I think, a lot of people. At some point you sort of get used to it, but I have friends that are better poker players than me that have losing years. Like they just play for 40 hours a week. They're very good. They play high stake tournaments, and they just get to the end of their year and they're like, wow, I lost this much money.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. The variance. And it's also this, like, these are smart people.
Yeah.
And they could go and have jobs that have the variances. What's your bonus like that year versus like, and do you roll really poorly and get laid off, or have your company go, like, those things are outside of your control, but it's like the paycheck you can get to do these things is to for these people who are really smart and can like calculate and handle risk really well.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of them will at some point, a lot of poker players tend to just get kind of sick of it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, like we were talking about in game dev, it's fun to learn new things, right? You don't just want to go make incremental games for the rest of your life. At some point, It's just going to get old and you're just going to want to learn something new. Yep. I think poker is a lot of those same ways. So a lot of poker players, very good poker players, will at some point retire, not because they're not winning, but just because they want to go scratch another itch in life. And a lot of them will go into things like day trading, angel finance, different types of investment where there's, different amounts of risk analysis that they feel like they can put their skill set to use.
Yeah. Or they come from the opposite perspective and they come from those things and then move into poker when they're like, kind of done with that sort of life. And
almost never.
No, it's only the other way, really. Okay.
Largely just because I think poker, like chess, it's really hard to get into that. It's really hard to get into poker at later in life and be good at it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much to it that there's
like how many grandmasters in chess are there? The highest level of chess below world championship, right? So how many grandmasters in chess are there that got into chess as an adult? Like, I don't know if it's actually zero. I think it actually might be zero.
Like, these are people who were child prodigies who just kind of grew up with it.
Yeah. I think I looked it up like months ago, and I think there's like a couple exceptions of people that kind of got into poker, or got into chess like as an adult, meaning like 18 years old. But like I don't think there's anyone in the world out of 9 billion people out there, like there's like one or two people, like literally, but to be able to get into something like chess past the age of 30 and become a grandmaster, as in poker, we say you're drawing dead. Like there's just no shot.
Yeah.
I think game dev is somewhat similar, meaning that, so also in poker, like getting into poker after the age of 30, I think someone is drawing very slim to ever actually be very good at the game. Same with like
this off the
World
list
of
things
Warcraft.
To do. I never wanted to be a poker player, but
like
I'm
imagine trying
now,
to
so
become imagine trying to become the best League of Legends player or Dota player or TFT player or World of Warcraft arena player at the age of 35. There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah.
It would be you would be like the biggest exception in the world if you became like a very good professional. Imagine becoming like a professional Counter-Strike player at the age of 35. Like there's no way. Your reflexes are too slow. Your brain just doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah.
Poker is not an exception, even though poker, I think, feels like an exception to a lot of people because it's quote unquote gambling. It's a strategy game at the end of the day. And like chess, there's no instinct, there's no quick reaction time, but you're going to have,
it's still,
I don't
it's
know
a real-time game. You
player,
can't pause the game and parse it for 10 minutes.
I don't know of a single poker player over the age of 30 that's very good at the game that got into poker after the age of 30.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 31.
Yep. So don't get into poker. No, I'm just kidding. You could become but just to clarify, it doesn't mean you couldn't get really good at poker. It just means you would never be able to compete at the highest level, just like in chess, right? Like you could absolutely have someone that has never played League of Legends in their life and picks it up at the age of 30 and gets to the top 1% of the ladder.
Yeah.
You could absolutely achieve that, but just because you're in the top 1%, there's still 100,000 people better than you or whatever.
Yeah. I have no desire to play poker in my life. I like poker. I played it a bunch as a kid, more recreationally than anything. And I'm like, it's interesting. And it was interesting to read a book about it and take that perspective. But it's like, I'm trying to think about why am I okay with the risk of game development? And I think so far what's been nice for me is that it doesn't, like, worst case scenario, I lose some time.
Yeah.
And it's not like I also then put myself in financial ruin. Like I haven't done any sort of bets where it's like, oh, I'm betting that in the next year I'll make enough money to be able to keep paying off these loans or pay off this like XY. Like I haven't done any.
Like
I could,
a lot of
right? I could go out
do that.
and I also have now assets that I could then go and be like, okay, well, here's this X, Y, and Z. Then my loans will come, or the bank will come due, and it'll be like, hey, we need, like, I haven't made those sort of bets, and I feel like that, like, worst case scenario is I hit back down to zero, and now I've proved I can work my way up from zero, but it's like it's never going to be like, oh, and now I'm, infinitely in debt, and I, am just financially ruined from this stuff.
The one thing that I actually wanted to say in regards to the topic we were chatting about before, which is basically trying to solve the indie game dev equation, now that you have a lot more data around like making a successful incremental game on Steam, like you can replicate it to a decent degree of confidence. However, a lot of game dev just is an artistic thing. And I do think if you start to pull too much of an artistic thing into just crunching numbers, you can sort of lose vision of what actually makes a good game, and then it can bite you in the butt.
Yes. Yeah. We still, it's actually at the top of my brain is like still needing to be artistic and make creative games and be a creative person, because that's a huge reason that I chose. I want to be an entrepreneur. Well, I am an entrepreneur, but like the reason it was game dev was because it's such a low investment, but it's like I also like the creativity. It's what's keeping me here. It's why now that I've done this and proven I can make a successful game, I'm not going back and getting another corporate job again. It's like, oh, I actually really liked the journey of getting here, being a creative person, and how does that stay at the core of what we do, and like have creative brain and have like business brain, and have these two people fight so that we find a happy medium.
The journey is something I talk a lot about just in life in general, whatever my friends are pursuing or whatever I pursue, or your journey within indie game development. The journey is what makes life life. I know that sounds a little bit cliche or whatever, but
it's cliche.
If you were to just give someone a successful indie game, but they didn't have to sort of struggle to get there, they're not going to necessarily appreciate the rewards that they reaped if they didn't sow the seeds or whatever.
Yeah, and like you struggling last year as far as not reaching the same profits at 2024 probably made these last couple W's feel really good.
Yeah. It's nice. Tournament variance is like this interesting thing where, like I said before, a lot of people, even poker players, too closely correlate success to results. So you do sort of get like appreciation or recognition from your peers, just like in game dev. I mean, how good does it feel to release a game about feeding a black hole and have other successful game developers be like, good job, buddy. Like you're in, like come in, you're in the circle, you did it. Like receiving that sort of recognition from your peers, I think for me, just because I'm human, goes a long way.
Yeah. I would define success. Here's how I define it for myself. It's like still doing something that I want to be doing. Like, yeah. I think that's what struck me as like talking to a buddy of mine, Thomas Stewart, on a podcast recently. It's like, we were talking about game dev 3 years ago together, and we're both still doing it with different journeys and different paths and different financial outputs, but like we're both still doing the thing we want to do. And like that takes grit, that takes determination. That's something that you have to be nimble and flexible to figure out what does that path look like, what does that journey look like that keeps you doing that thing you want to do. And I view that as success in any sort of pursuit, is like, are you still doing the thing that you want to be doing in the long run and found your way to keep doing that thing?
Yeah, I hope I get to meet Thomas someday. I'd imagine our paths will cross at some point, but I've, watched like yours, some of his content in the past, and some of his games to me have been interesting. And I hope I get to meet Thomas one day. Maybe I'll get to do a podcast with Thomas one day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can make that connection for you.
Yeah, it'd be fun. He seems like a good guy. There's so many cool people in the game dev space, and I can't wait. One day I will also release a successful indie game, and then you can be there in that group and just welcome me with open arms. Like, you did it, Steven. Well done.
Can you make a game with poker at it somehow too? Like, I feel like that's where it's like you probably have such a unique perspective on poker.
Dude, imagine how I felt when Balatro came out.
You're like, dude, come on.
Oh my gosh. When Balatro came out and I was sitting there playing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a freaking idiot. Like, how did I not come up with this? Like, this is it. But Balatro is like kind of it. Like, I don't know. Yeah, but dude, it's been on my mind. The day that Balatro came out, it's been on my mind nonstop.
Sure. Like, as it probably should.
How can I release a poker related indie video game? Because I have a lot of like relatively high connections in poker.
Yeah.
That if I released a video game that was adjacent to poker somehow, like I could get the word out. Like some of my I'm friends with like relatively famous poker players that they could absolutely plug my game for them if I wanted them to. I could even go as far as to like say do you know any poker names, like famous people?
I've listened to Nate and Maria's podcast for a little bit. So they've mentioned a bunch of people.
Was this Maria Ho? I don't know.
Maria Konakovic, I believe.
Yeah, Konakovic. She has
won a couple bracelets last year too.
Yeah. Did she? Maybe. I know who that Maria is. There's a couple well-known female figures named Maria, and there's a few like just very famous people that I just know that I have their number to the point where like if I ever got to the point where I released a poker video game, I could just text them and be like, hey, do you want to do a couple voiceover lines for me? Like that, boom. That'd
be cool.
To me, feels like the very obvious crossover that I need to take advantage of at some point in my life.
It's probably where your dredge is, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like if I'm putting a bet somewhere on you, I'm probably putting the bet that it's going to be some sort of poker related game, which probably looks nothing like Balatro. Probably looks not like it. Probably looks like something completely different. Is.
Yeah, cause like Balatro is like the perfect storm where it just, it's not poker at all, but it's using like poker hands in a way to create this really elegant roguelike and insanely just satisfying game loop.
Maybe it's not even a roguelike. Who knows?
It doesn't even have to be a roguelike. There's other things that I've thought about. There's all these dumb poker VR games that just never take off. I don't think anything like that is there. I've thought about doing like a time loop poker game. So, like a Groundhog Day time loop sort of game where you walk into like a poker game, but your goal is to like get out alive, and you sort of like cheat your way through, like being able to like know what happens in the future. But that hasn't really quite clicked for me yet.
It could be friend slop, kind of like Schedule 1, but you're starting a poker ring 2 or something.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's like a friend slop. Like one thing we didn't talk about today, and maybe we can talk about another time if we ever grab a beer together, is like the private poker game industry. So basically non-casino cash games. So just illegal cash games that they're technically illegal, but like no one cares. And basically the host is taking a rake, basically an illegal fee, just like a casino does, except they're doing it without a gaming license, right? So there's so many fun aspects from something like that where I see, what's the indie drug game that came out lately? Schedule 1 or 2 or what?
Yeah.
I haven't played it yet, but you're building your drug empire, right? You'd think
you start
that
in a
there's
motel,
like
growing in a motel room is great. It's like
it's one of the 12 games on my wish list is Schedule 1. I need to go try it. But yeah, imagine like a poker friend slop game. There's like VR poker games like that, but no one's really iterated on, I think, what
you could sit down and play poker too to make extra money. Like you can rig the board. You can God, there's
something there. There's something there. Yeah, for sure.
The thing is, you have the experience, right? If I make that game, I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. I've never sat and done I've actually never played poker for money.
Same with like the guy that made Balatro. He said he's never played poker before, right? So to make something that's poker adjacent, you don't necessarily need to be the world's best poker player, but I'd like to think that my background could at least lead to some interesting mechanics or systems in game dev.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be cool to have a union where it's like it feels good for someone who has played a lot of this poker stuff, and like someone who hasn't could be like, is this what it's actually like to do this stuff? Like that's where it's like your voice and your thoughts could probably make that feel that way.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like that poker related, right? For me to, I think, still capture on this nugget of my brain. I mean, even if it was just going to a private underground game, but like, the game is rigged against you, but it's like an FPS, like, and the mafia I don't know. It's like some friend slot game where like you and your friends are trying to cheat and you get caught, but then it just turns into an FPS game. Like, you could definitely go that route, right?
For sure.
It's been on my mind for 2 years. If you ever have a bright idea in something that's poker adjacent, please, I'm all ears.
I'll hit you up. I mean, I did just finish his book, so I'm done thinking about poker as much as I did over the past year. But, yeah. Any, I guess we're at about an hour and a half here. My final question I like to ask, unless you had any other questions you wanted to cover here. Cool. My final question I like to ask is, how do you manage scope creep, whether that's at the poker table, whether that's with GameDev.tv, whether that's with your game dev stuff? How do you manage scope creep? And maybe I'd be most interested at the poker table, if you can see the idea of scope creep in poker somehow.
I'm not sure how scope creep would relate.
Would that be like sitting in a pot that you shouldn't be a part of anymore, and like kind of throwing bad money at like good money after bad?
Yeah, there's what's like referred to as like pot odds, right, in poker, where you've already put a bunch of money in the pot, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should put more chips in if it's negative EV. I suppose there's a scope creep analogy in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like my buddies definitely keep playing in games they think they're plus EV, but they're just not. So like, there's not a lot of like cheating in poker, but it exists, right? So like I'm pretty positive I was cheated in an online poker game lately. It can be really hard to separate your own bias in something like that, saying, I think I'm plus EV in something like this, I should keep playing, but maybe you're being cheated. And to clarify being cheated, like let's say you're playing in an online poker game with 8 people, but 3 of them are sharing cards, that's pretty big advantage, right?
Yeah.
And there's what's referred to as a showdown in poker. So basically when you get to the end of a poker hand, and the cards are on their back, someone wins and someone loses, if you're a good poker player, you can start to sort of recognize these patterns. And if you start to see things pop up in a way that is starting to smell a little fishy over time, and especially in an online game like that, you can start to intuitively make your best judgment call on if you're being cheated or not, which again is kind of why poker is sort of an online poker is sort of a dying thing. Let's see if I can answer your question in a better way. I think I'd like to just answer it in actually sort of a life way, which is
even better.
The thing that I'm struggling with lately, and maybe I can back into how do I avoid scope creep. I don't have a great answer there, but I am struggling lately about taking on too many projects.
Sure.
So maybe you can give me a quick therapy session. That might be a better way to end the podcast. So I'm taking a lot on in life lately between game dev education. I'm the product director for Game Dev TV, and if you, the viewer, skipped to the end of this video and you want to check out our free courses, well, we just recently released a few free courses to get you in Game Dev TV, which is actually just like if there's anywhere to start your video game dev journey, it's with a free course on the Game Dev TV platform. You can choose between Blender, Unity, Godot, or which one did I miss? There's Unity, Godot, Blender, or Unreal, and I actually do the Unity one. So if you want to see me teach the Unity game engine in about an hour and a half, giving a basic baseline introduction on those types of things, that's actually me teaching it on our platform, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But there's that. There's game dev education. There's me still trying to play poker. There's me managing a 2.5-year-old son, my lovely wife, our cat, and a 13-week-year-old puppy. With a whole bunch of yard work to do. And also I'm sitting here going, maybe later this year I can hire a team of 2 people. Like, life creep is absolutely an issue for me right now, to the point where, I'm struggling to even find the time to go lift some weights downstairs in my weight room, So if you have any like therapy session for me, I'd love to hear it.
Write them all down in an ordered list with a numbered list, and then it'll force you to prioritize them one to whatever, and use that as your North Star, I suppose. Like, some of those things will have to fall through the cracks, and trying to figure out which ones you're okay dropping is. Yeah. This is something I'm trying to come up with too. Is like, I have a lot of opportunities coming up in front of me. Thorny wants to open every door and go in every door and do every opportunity, and we're too valuable to spread ourselves thin. I think our plus EV is way higher if we commit to a couple things and do them well. Like, it would be really cool to get way more involved in my local International Game Developer Association chapter and like really dive into that, because it's a cool community and I feel like I could help it out. But like, I'm also new to that community. And at the same time, I really don't need that commitment to hang over my head. And still, now it's going to be something I do, but it's lower on the totem pole for priorities. So I don't know. That's probably where I'm at. Is like the hard reality is some of those things will have to be dropped. And, some of those things are things you probably are unwilling to drop. And those are the things you probably are hopefully at the top of your list.
Yeah, because family's up at the top, right? And then there's everything else, and where does those slot in? Are you married?
I'm not married, no.
Do you live with anyone? Cat, dog?
Just me and a cat. His name's Carl.
Awesome.
I don't know where he is.
Yeah, there was a couple times in my 20s before I met my now wife where I just sort of simplified everything for those reasons, where it was like, what's most important to me? Let's just de-scope my life to the most granular way possible. And man, I love those moments.
Yeah.
As soon as you have a family that relies on you for different things, it can be harder. As soon as you have, we'll leave it at that for now. I'll start oversharing if I go too far. So you're absolutely correct. It's been on my mind a lot lately, trying to like personally decide what's most important to me in life. And I think your recommendation of going from top to bottom is really something.
Yeah. Yeah. I like numbered lists. It's unordered lists are great, but as soon as you put a number on it, it literally makes your brain be like, which one's number one? Which one's number two?
Yeah, what's hard for me is I know if I was to do, let's say I ranked them all from 1 to 10, I would have like 1 as family, and then everything else is going to be like 1.1, 1.2. 1.3.
But that's still ordered, right?
Yeah,
even in your instance where you say 1.1, you say they're all level 1, but there's a level 2 that, and so
absolutely.
It's a hard place to be, and it's something I'm struggling with. It's something I've always struggled with, and it's part of the journey, right? It's There's so many great things to do in this world.
To bring this whole conversation to a close and sort of to loop it all together at the beginning, when you asked me my 2026 goals, right? Like that's how you kicked off the podcast. Yeah. And I basically hesitated. Now you know why I hesitated, because of all these things that I'm trying to juggle. And the way I answered that was hopefully at the second, half of this year, I can circle back around to creating a game that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think this is sort of the way I'm trying to de-scope my life, is bucket them. Like let's do one thing at a time, try to put all my effort and energy into it. Yeah. And one of the reasons I just love everything that we've chatted about, game dev education, poker, is like you, if I had to go into an office for 8 to 9 hours a day, I'd just blow my brains out. But I love that game dev and poker and game dev education can sort of have all of these unique sprints and project them and bucket them and do one thing at a time for days, weeks, or months at a time. And I get to divide my passions up a little bit, which I'm very grateful for.
That is cool. That is cool. And a lovely way to end look at that circle all the way back around.
There you go.
Well,
it's almost like I've spent years of my life circular teaching at Game Dev TV. Go try. Yeah, dude, thank you so much. I want to do more of this in the future. So if there's other even podcasters out there, I'd love to hop on your show and hop on to some degree. And so thank you for having me on. I genuinely really appreciate it. It was actually a goal of mine to do more of this in 2026. And so when you reached out, it was like, great, this is excellent timing. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining the stand-up in that meeting. It was, like I said, you seem like a cool person, and I want to talk to cool people and just get a chat with
I'll be
them.
back.
That's like the whole point of them. So yeah, we'll have you back with the poker game. That's going to be just that perfect slice of your experiences. Sweet.
I love it. Thank you so much, man.
That was a pretty cool conversation, wasn't it? I am immensely blown away by somebody who can work in such a high variance field. But like you said, game dev is also high variance, but it's like the number of bets I'm taking is so small. Like I've made 3 commercial games in my time versus like having to grind out tournament after tournament. And even like hearing him talk about the last 2025 last year, like, and not kind of reaching maybe his target numbers for finances, and then hitting where he like won 2 tournaments, then kind of the third or fourth quarter of the year to basically blow past his previous earnings from 2024. It like I'm not sure I could handle being a poker player in that sort of a way. But hell, I mean, I put 6,000 hours into this. I'm not saying I'm going to play poker. He definitely actually talked me off the fence of ever wanting to play poker professionally. But it's like I could see there being some corollaries between these two things. And like I hope you look at your life or the decisions you're making and maybe got a taste of something a little bit different. If you're curious and you want a book recommendation to continue this sort of reading, On the Edge is it's flipped over for your screen, but I'll leave a link down below to On the Edge. It's by Nate Silver, one of my favorite. He's kind of a reporter, kind of just a snarky, great data nerd who I've followed for at this point over a decade in politics and sports and everything in between. This is his most recent book, also not sponsored, but it's called On the Edge by Nate Silver. The art of risking everything, and absolutely fascinating read. Changed the way I think about risk, and also a fun little thing is it talks a lot about Sam Bankman-Fried and his rise and fall. And it seems like Nate got some really exclusive access to talking to Sam Bankman-Fried back in 2022 when it was all kind of collapsing around him, and seeing how he thinks about risk and stuff like that. Not glorifying him. The dude's kind of an asshole. The dude fucked over so many fucking people, which sucks. But we can still learn a thing or two from these people who have these meteoric rises, and maybe learn even more from them having meteoric falls of where we can watch ourselves. So food for thought, an interesting book. I would highly recommend it. But that's it. I've been Aramis. I hope you have a good rest of your day, week, month, year, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Bye-bye.